Hello, everybody, wherever you are. Welcome to another episode of the Greatness Engineering Hour show, the show where I bring you champion people with a particular knowledge, people who have stories of triumph, or people actually sharing knowledge that we need, to improve and to grow and to go to the next level of our greatness. Today, my guest is based in the US. And we are going to talk about the future of tech startup because, as you know, with the pandemic, there have been a lot of disruption, and we really want to know, what's going on in the technology sphere. And there's also something that. Uh, my guest is going to share today. He has a project that can actually help a lot of us, and I'm really looking forward to know a little bit more about it. And I know that you're gonna like it. So, who is my guest today? My guest is David Wentworth Small, and he's a consultant, so he's a developer. He's been a developer and an architect, and he's also an author and working on different projects, especially large projects. And what is done recently is basically created and funded an online organizer and task manager, that focus on helping people to be more organized in the digital age. And as you know, we can get swamped into, the digital world. And it's important that we get organized as everything, and that we don't, get completely swamped into this world. He's also the author of the book Selling the Cow, and in this book, it discusses the five pillar of disruption. So we'll know a little bit about it. I will ask him a little bit more detail on that, and also what it takes for individual to start thinking disruptive regarding businesses and life in the post-corona age. So stay tuned as usual. Get your pen, get your paper, and participate. If you have a question, don't hesitate, because I think it's gonna be very informative for us, and to understand really what's gonna happen in this digital age, not only now but after the coronavirus. So don't go anywhere. I'm bringing David just now.
Right? On memories. But as I got older, I started to be more aware of some of the abusive sides of
So welcome, David. Welcome to the Greatness Engineering Hour show. I hope you are doing great on the other side of the world, and that I'm really looking forward to learn from you today on what's going on in the technology world, and also from your last your recent project. So before we get into to that stage. can you please introduce yourself and let us know who you are and what you've been up to and what are the key things that you've done so far, in your journey professionally and also personally, if that's you have something to share on that front.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for having me. And so, my name is David Wentworth Small. I've worked within the field of technology for over the last 20 years. And recently, I've branched out from that to focus on my own startup, which is called Clarity Park. And so,
Mm-hmm,
Clarity Park is a personal organizer which helps individuals to become more productive. And
mm-hmm,
obviously, there's a lot of technology around that, how we do that, but also it touches into other things because we've assessed, some of the modern psychological methods of productivity and realized that they're not going to cut it in this day and hour. And so
mm-hmm,
it's almost like an oxymoron in the sense that we're using technology, but we're rethinking how we use it to make individuals more productive because technology, when used in a bad sense, can hinder an individual's
mm-hmm,
productivity.
mm-hmm,
So, in working with Clarity Park, one of the things I've done is there's a book that I've put out recently called Selling the Cow.
mm-hmm,
And selling the cow for me, it was a personal effort that I wanted to do because it really talks about disruption. And in that, I talk about the 5 pillars of disruption. And it was, a novel concept because it used a modern fable, modern story tale about Jack and the Beanstalk. And
mm-hmm,
so when it comes to it, this is something perhaps that a lot of people are very familiar with. A lot of people perhaps have heard this as a child if you grew up and at a time period where fables were a big thing and Mother Goose and all these other fables. So Jack and the Beanstalk was something that people knew as something that they were very familiar with. But the reason
mm-hmm,
why I utilized that was because there were principles that I found within the simple fable that were very easy for me to present. And psychologically, when it comes to disruption, one of the factors that I found was so essential in working with anyone is to
mm-hmm,
take something that they know. Let's start off with something that you're very familiar with.
mm-hmm,
And I'm going to show you why this is not what you think it is. And
mm-hmm,
this is so critical when it comes to disruption. And
mm-hmm.
what I find is a lot of individuals have a hard time thinking outside of the box, which is one of the things I talk about within that book, Selling
Mm-hmm.
the Cow.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's the complexity is increasing in everything that we do. The disruption, there's so much uncertainty, ambiguity, volatility, and I think people are really struggling, like you said, to really understand how to use things and be productive in a way. But what actually trigger you to really put all your effort into it? Is it a personal experience, or is it something else? What is it? What is the why of all of this
Well,
work?
I'll tell you, from
Mm-hmm,
my background and my perspective, I grew up in Canada. I'm a Canadian citizen, born by
mm-hmm,
birth. I was in the US when the whole coronavirus broke out, actually, and I left. Actually, I came back to Canada, that's where I am now. I said, let me just stay here for a while till all this
mm-hmm,
madness works out before I travel back. And Canada has right now about around 9,000 cases of corona for a population of 30,000. Right now in the US, population of 300,000 with over 200,000 corona cases, deaths
mm-hmm,
actually, I'm sorry, 200,000 deaths. And so when it comes to it, I mean, just to discuss disruption on the heels of, last night's US presidential debate, which was the first, I believe, of 3. I mean,
mm-hmm,
it's people are watching this,
mm-hmm,
and a lot of people, they see the riots, they see the George Floyd, they see a lot of things happening, and a lot of people are confused. A lot
mm-hmm,
of people are scared, and a lot of people are uncertain about what's going to happen.
mm-hmm,
And so, for myself, I've always worked in technology.
mm-hmm,
And when you work in technology, you work as a developer, there's a difference.
mm-hmm,
And the difference being is that I've worked at a managerial level with individuals that are not developers.
mm-hmm,
And when you work with individuals that are not developers, yet they're managing or leading sometimes these projects, it's interesting because their perception of what needs to be done is sometimes totally off. And the
Mhm.
reason being is because the technology is changing at such a fast and rapid pace
Mhm.
that some of the individuals that are managing or that are in these positions of management, they are totally aloof in terms
Mhm.
of some of the ground factors and what needs to be done. And so what really did it for me was I was at one large insurance company that had probably about $30 billion in assets just in that particular branch alone. They're probably number 7 in the world. And I'm
Mhm.
there, and they had me do work as a futurist. So they wanted me to go out. They were worried about the competition, and they were really worried about startup companies that would enter into the fintech markets and begin to cause disruption.
Mhm.
And they were so fearful because just a small movement by a group of 4 guys out of New York could literally disrupt their stock price, costing them billions of dollars.
Mhm.
So they're trying to figure out what the blockchain is. They're trying to figure out Bitcoin. They're trying to work this out. And again, just to reiterate to the audience, these are people at a very high level managing over funds that are
Mhm.
filled with uncertainty. And so when I was working with these individuals, one of the things I realized, I said, you know what? They really do not understand
Mhm.
the direction that the world is taking. And I
Mhm.
remember we had a meeting, and in this meeting, there's probably about 3,000 people present. And, the top director for technology was there, and I was speaking with him about our division. And in this conversation, I asked him a very simple question. And the
Mhm.
question I asked him was, I said, listen, I want to know, are you a financial company or are you driven by technology? And for him, it was
Mhm.
almost comical. He said, "Well, we work in the insurance company. We manage assets. Of course, we're a financial company. We're driven by the financial needs of the customer."
Mhm.
I said, "No." I said, "No. Things have changed.
Mhm.
If there's a hack that takes place to your company, you're out of business. You will lose so much value of your stock. You will lose the trust of your customers. If one employee walks out with a USB containing customer information, it will disrupt your company." And I said, to myself, I said, the sad thing is this man doesn't understand it. And this is why they're so fearful of some of these smaller startups. And
Mhm.
so I
Mhm.
think that, the more and more that I've worked in terms of the industry, the more I realized that there were individuals that had positions of power that sometimes made decisions which were very contrary. And when it comes to a lot of disruption that's taking place, people oftentimes think that disruption is the work of brilliant people. That's what they often think. And oftentimes they don't realize that what's happening is there are individuals that are complacent and
Mhm.
sometimes aloof concerning technology and concerning the direction of where things are going. And because their failure to understand disruption is why they make the poor decisions that they've made that led large companies to be obsolete in our generation. When you
Mhm.
think about retail, okay, we think about the biggest retailer right now is Amazon. Okay.
Mhm.
If we go back 30 years ago, most the viewers will understand there were companies like Sears, Roebuck. Okay, Sears
Mhm.
at one time was the big leader. Okay, the failure of Sears to develop a proper online presence and to dominate in that market is really the success of Amazon.
Mhm.
It's the failure of these large retailers. When Jeff Bezos started, there was large retailers with large amounts of capital that could have easily dominated the online sphere. But
Mhm.
somehow these individuals, they looked at it, they contemplated it, and they failed to make the necessary adjustments. You look at Kmart. Okay,
Mhm.
there's been an onslaught where a lot of huge retailers have failed to make that adjustment to the online world. And I remember, as a kid going to Kmart, huge
Mhm.
store. I remember, years ago, even as of recent, the blue light special, and these are
Mhm. Mhm.
huge,
That's
huge
exciting.
institutions. Exactly. And yet for all of that, you wonder and you say to yourself, and again, most people, they think of the brilliance of Amazon, but they don't think about, the failure of these large institutions.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
it really, really makes a difference when you start to understand disruption. And
Mhm.
disruption has always been understood from a grass level perspective.
Mhm, 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 mhm. And one question: do you think that leadership now should actually include digital intelligence, basically, in a way, as a leader, especially as somebody at the top of the company? Do you think it is a necessity to have this digital intelligence knowledge to make the
It
right decisions?
It is. And part of it when it comes to digital intelligence is
Mm-hmm,
properly understanding how data works.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So, I spent a lot of time with different venture capital individuals, partners, and, just talking to them.
mm-hmm,
And it may sound odd, but in the early 90s, I remember meeting with a gentleman. I was in Toronto at the time, and I met
mm-hmm.
with a gentleman, and this gentleman was very wealthy. And we sat down, we had a meeting. And you got to remember, as a young kid in Toronto, young developer, you're
Mhm,
trying to raise capital. I started buying domain names. That's what I started doing. And so, the people that I hung around, the people that I knew, they did not understand technology.
mhm.
And I remember at the time there's one particular domain name I looked at, and the guy wanted $10,000. And I said to myself at the time, I said, "Wow, $10,000." It was a two-character.com.
Mhm,
And in today's society, $10,000 two-character.com, that's a great deal. But in the
mhm.
90s, that was a lot of money. And
Yeah.
this was risky technology. And my family actually, my mother and father, they're from the Caribbean, they're from Barbados.
Mhm.
And so, to go to a Caribbean parent and say, "Yeah, I want to spend $10,000 on a domain name in the 90s. Can you help me
Yeah,
out?"
right.
Right?
They are what? What are you talking about?
Exactly. Right. Well, you need to go buy a house, right? Buy a domain name. But that same domain name, it was FB.com, turned around and sold for $1 million to Facebook.
Mhm,
So, when it comes to it, what happens is you have a lot of individuals that are looking at the past. And when it comes to it, they want to figure out things by looking at the past, which,
mhm,
I do understand historical relevance. But the reality is if you want to make certain of your future, you have to start contemplating the future. You have to
mhm,
start contemplating technology. You have to start contemplating data. You have to start contemplating how do these things play into the
mhm,
general sphere of life. And so this is
mhm,
what a lot of people fail to realize. If you go back to 2007, okay, 2007 was perhaps one of the most significant years. And there's a
mhm,
lot of authors that are futurists that make reference to 2007 because around that time you had a lot of different technology emerging. You had the iPhone coming out for the first time. You had
mhm,
Amazon starting to make its heels. And so what happened is that technology in 2007 began to affect the job market,
mhm,
increasingly. When you go to a bank machine, you are going to use a service that's been designed to replace tellers.
mhm.
Now, the reality is not everyone wants to use a bank machine. I have friends I talk to, there's friends I know, they're like, "Oh, I just want to go to the bank." And I'm like, "But why?" Right? And then that conversation says, "Well, I just want to talk to someone because I want to check my
Mhm,
account." I'm like, "Well, you can check it online. You can check it on a machine." No, no, no. I want to talk to that person and I want to be there and I want them to tell me why I was charged 3 cents interest on this. But that generation is passing away.
mhm, mhm,
And the tolerance that institutions have for those type of customers, you see it more so that customer service is being relegated to phone lines and to online chat rooms.
mhm,
And so when it comes to the moving of this technology, for the average individual, they have to think, well, where am I going to find myself? You have
mhm,
individuals that are in school studying courses that have no relevance to the work, to real life and to the technology fields that exist.
mhm,
And one of the things that I found was when I spent time going to school studying all these things, a lot of things when I came out were irrelevant. And I had to re educate myself. And I have to
mhm,
constantly re educate myself. And I realized there's a lot of people that are in school learning and studying things that have no bearing. And the
mhm.
disconnect between the educational system and the work world it's huge.
Yeah.
And yet, for all of that, this is something that's not addressed at a practical level. And
Mhm,
so we allow people to rack up huge amounts of debt studying things that perhaps may or may not be relevant 3 to 4 years down the road.
mhm,
And this is
mhm,
what I find is really scary. So when it comes to disruption and when it comes to data, when you read data, not everyone understands the importance of data or how to
Mhm.
interpret that data. When it comes to this coronavirus, one of the things I believe is that, people talk about misinformation. Why is it
Mhm.
everyone wearing masks? I know that there's a lady I knew. She was down in, I think, Kenya at the time. She was posting videos in Kenya. Some people weren't wearing masks. Some people in North America were shot. When it comes to the coronavirus, it's very
Mhm.
hard for individuals to listen to the news, to hear about these amount of deaths, but to not
Mhm.
experience it around them. And so this is where it's a disconnect, because a lot of people say, well, let me pull up, let me look at the flu. Let me see how many people died of the flu last year. And they look at this data and they try to compare it. And so
Exactly.
and what it is that, there's an old saying. Okay. The old saying is, if it doesn't happen on social media, it doesn't exist. And there are people that believe this in this day and hour. Okay. For
Mhm.
something to
Mhm.
have
Mhm.
happened, I got to see a YouTube video. I got to see the Instagram. I got to see this. And so people are very well aware of small anecdotal data. Okay.
Mhm.
Some guy falls off a goat in the middle of Siberia. And, people are, oh, did you see that video? Did you see that video? And they see this. And so when it comes to it, that video is communicating a message. And so
Mhm.
data and the transmission of data is not just numbers or binary numbers, but it's communicating data. So when it
Mhm.
comes to the coronavirus, there are people that have corona, but you're unaware of who has it. When it comes to the ages of the individuals, you're unaware of the specific ages of how many people of this age have corona. You're unaware of the data location. And what
Mhm.
happens is we're so used to processing specific data. This happened at this time, this took place at this event. So when we see data that's vague, it makes people skeptical.
Yeah.
And it's not that it didn't happen, it's the presentation of the data. When I know someone that mentioned someone we know and said, oh, this person died of corona, and they actually had other complications. And so
Mhm.
for me, I'm saying, okay, well, what did they have? Like, I want to know, right? When you
Yeah.
said
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
person
Yeah.
passed away of corona
Exactly.
and other complications, like if he had a heart
Mhm.
attack, it makes a difference, right? But
Mhm.
again, that's the generation that we live in. And so when it comes to it, I think you have a generation of politicians that do not understand the need to distribute data, the need
Mhm.
to get proper data to individuals in a way that's convincing. I mean,
Mhm.
we're in one sense inundated with data. If I want to study out the stock price for an event that happened 3 months ago, it's very easy for me to check it out. But if I want to study out corona numbers, it's not as simple. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
is the
Mhm.
generation we live in. And I think that when it comes to it, especially for the viewers and for, people at large, they need to understand how to properly read data. What
Mhm.
data do I need to make the decisions that I need to make? If you're a student and you're about to make a decision to enter into a university or a college, it's very important that you take a look at what jobs are hiring and what are the qualifications, and
Mhm.
to assess your course material and say, is this going to help me? Or am I going to have to complete 4, 5, 6 years of some type of
Mhm.
education? And then after completing my schooling, am I going to have to go and do some other course or do some other studies that's going to add to my workload? Right.
Mhm.
These are all things that people need to consider when they're making
Mhm.
choices.
Mhm. And that's the and that's the message. Like you said, data is now the new currency. Basically, we need to understand data. We need to know how to read it. We need to know how to use it. And it's not something static as well, because a lot of the thing that we are doing, especially for students right now, some jobs are gonna come that they don't know about or right now. So they have to be able to update themselves using the data so that they can be ready for when things are changing, or when another disruption is coming up. And so how do they do that? Because like you say, it's quite unsettling, because you don't really know what's gonna happen. You don't really know, especially how it's the data are gonna be used, and the interpretation that's going to be done. So, what are the strategy or the tools that you think we should all have to be able to read those data and use them in a sensible way?
The first thing that comes to mind is critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, at one point, I wanted to be a journalist. That was my dream job.
Mm-hmm.
And, there were some people I knew, they were professors, and they said, no, 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 you need to go into law. Don't waste your time in that journalism. That's what they said, media. Okay. And, they gave me a
Mhm.
joke, and the joke was meant to scare me. And they said, you know what the difference between a journalist and a medium pizza is? I said, no, a medium pizza feeds a family of four.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
thought was, if you want to survive, you're going to have to figure out how to make money. But at that
Mhm.
time, what was happening was journalism itself was on the decline.
Mhm.
And so, I ended up going into the computer field, which, really served me well later on. But when it comes to it, what really helped me moving forward was critical thinking.
Mhm.
And so the ability to process data is so crucial in this day and hour. When
Mhm.
it comes to it, we have so much media that we're being fed, and we have an overload of information. You're on the web, you want to find, okay, what courses are going to be relevant in the future, what jobs are going to be relevant. And people end up reading reports, and some of these reports that they read are
Mhm.
filled with numbers and stats, and sometimes it doesn't bear relevance. And so critical thinking is so necessary in this generation. And so
Mhm.
when it comes to predicting the future, I think the first thing you need to start with is the understanding that you can't. That many
Mhm.
people have tried. There are people like Nostradamus that came close. But when it comes to predicting the job market, the best thing you can do is to look at relevant data. And when it comes to deciding relevant data, you have to look at the way that things currently are and exist now. And you'd
Mhm.
be surprised how many people, in terms of making career choices, whether it's school or whether it's post-secondary education, how many individuals never read the classified ads and look at jobs,
Mhm.
right? Sometimes it's simply a matter of reading the classified ads, looking at jobs, seeing what's hiring, what are they paying, and what the
Mhm.
qualifications are. Because what a
Mhm.
school does is a school sells itself by saying, hey, if you have this degree, you can work in this field. But
Mhm.
then you read the classified ad. The classified ad says, no, you got to have that degree. You're going to have a 4 years of experience. You're going to have this. And if you do have all these things, then you know what? We're going to start you off at a minimum salary.
Mhm.
And a lot of people are shocked because when they transition to the work world and they end up beginning to study out what's required, it's so different than what they were taught and the notions that they had in school. So part of
Mhm.
that critical thinking is to take a look and start to understand the job market now. You say, well, I'm
Mhm.
not going to
Mhm.
enter the job market for the next 4 years. That's good. But you need to keep abreast of what's taking place. And, there's
Mhm.
one gentleman actually I knew, and he was a great, great marketing guru. And he studied marketing statistical data. And he ended up, he wasn't a developer per se, but, he would always meet with me and he'd want to know about development. And he
Mhm.
started to work more and more in terms of statistical models and doing programming regarding that for marketing purposes. And
Mhm.
eventually, while he was in school, there was a large firm that hired him. And, he said, I cannot miss this opportunity. And so he started working for this large firm while going to school. And, I encouraged him. I said, that's one of the best things that you can do. I understand it's hard, but one of the hardest things is to graduate, have a huge student loan, huge debt, and to not be able to get any type of gainful employment to pay off that debt. And so
Mhm.
when you have, as a student, if you have an opportunity, if you're talking to companies while you're in school and the opportunity presents itself, that's like an NBA player doing a one and done. I mean, that's
Mhm.
like somebody in the NBA, like some young college player who's playing basketball saying, you know what, if I have a chance to go pro, well, I don't know what this college career will hold for me, but if I can secure my future now, then I'll take it. And a lot of
Mhm.
people do not think that way when it comes to the educational system and work. They
Mhm.
think I'm going to
Mhm.
finish and then I'll worry about that, which at that time, you've probably
It's
lost
too
about
late.
2 years. Exactly. It's
Ec-
too late.
Mhm.
Industry has changed. You weren't aware of this. They said you should have been doing this 2 years ago.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, so let's just see who we have. I think we have few people from Africa, actually. So we have Florence. Florence is watching from Burundi, and she is, yeah. So she's finding the conversation very interesting. We have Sophie. Sophie is watching from Cameroon, and she's also in STEM. I think she does a lot of work in STEM. Pushing women and girls to go into STEM. So she's confirming that data is the new currency. So let's have a short video and we'll be back with David. For those just joining us now, my guest today is David Wentworth Small, and we are talking about the future. Our focus today is the future of the tech startups. So don't go anywhere. We will be back in few minutes.
The interface of Clarity Park is designed in a way to help an individual that does not understand technology, that is not looking for something complicated in their life. If you notice to the left, we have segmented categories. The reason why we created segmented categories is because we understood that individuals have different hats that they wear throughout life. If you notice in the main interface itself, there's no ability to collapse the actual projects, which consist of several tasks. The reason why we did this was because there is a psychological effect when a person sees the amount of work that they have in front of them. So if you notice to the right, you have the task and you have the status. But also, if you notice right underneath the status, you have scheduled due date, which is used for calendaring, and you have financials. We wanted to ensure that you had the ability to enter your task in a very simple manner.
So we are back. We are back with David. So you started this, you funded this project and started it, Clarity Park. So what is Clarity Park, and what is the difference from that's what is the added value that it brings, compared to any other organizer that we have on the market, basically.
Well, I'll say this, and I'll say it with great confidence, that Clarity Park really is the future.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to it. And again, I've worked for large teams, I've worked with developers, and I've worked with project managers. And I also, as an individual, I've had to organize my own life, had to, make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to it, I realized that the greatest asset you have as an individual is not your finances, it's your time. This
Mm-hmm.
is the greatest
Mm-hmm.
thing that you have. The ability for a person to sit down and to begin to plan what they're going to do the next day is what makes us unique as human beings. The
Mm-hmm.
ability to sit down and plan your calendar for the next 3 months, the next 6 months, the next year is what is so powerful. So
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to it, people, when they want to start a business, oftentimes they say, well, I'm going to start a business, I'm going to do this, do that. And a lot of times they don't realize how critical a business plan is.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's critical for business, it's also critical for everyday life. So when it comes to Clarity Park, what I've done is, and this is the reason why I wrote about disruption, because I wanted to put into practice what I believed in
Mm-hmm.
theory and principle. And so a lot of times you have individuals that, they have these principles, they have these theories, and they begin to espouse these theories as academics. And it sounds good, it sounds great, but they don't really put it into practice. And
Mm-hmm.
there is a huge difference when you actually put something into practice that you have in principle and theory. So when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to Clarity Park, I designed it to help and to make people more productive. That
Mm-hmm.
was my
Mm-hmm.
key goal. And there was a lot of other projects I wanted to do, a lot of other projects I wanted to invest in, but I had to have an anchor point. And that anchor point was, if I start here by focusing on helping individuals, if I start by making individuals more productive, I have a business card.
Mm-hmm.
And that business card, one of the slogans I have is it's a see-through synthetic business card, and it says this business card is disposable, because I don't believe people should carry around stacks of business cards or Rolodexes anymore. If you
Mm-hmm.
go to old Rolodex rolling through, right? You should have everything on your phone, everything digital, easy contacts. So when it comes to the business card, I had a slogan, and the slogan was, "This card is disposable, but your time is not."
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to it, if I have a product that can make you more productive as an individual, and if I can teach you, and that's what we do, we have a blog that's part of it, we have the media, and if I can teach you about productivity, and if I can get you to think a certain way regarding your time, regarding your productivity, most
Mm-hmm.
individuals do not have what we call, in the project management world, a master list, a personal master list. And so, a personal master list is where you take time to write down everything that you're planning to do.
Mhm.
And then to properly organize that master list, to wake up, to have a morning routine where you say, okay, part of my morning routine is I've got to have a meeting with myself.
Mhm.
I've got to have a meeting where I sit down and begin to decide what are the things that I need to do to further myself in this life? What are the things that I need to do, the tasks that I need to take care of? And I've worked with organizations where it's sad and, large organizations where they have huge development projects where because
Mhm.
they were so busy, they let the domain name of the business expire. I've seen that happen. And part of that is mismanagement.
Mhm.
And the other thing I realized that was so critical is that a person's personal life can play into their professional life if it's not managed well. And
Mhm.
so we all know this scenario, right? You're at work and somebody's rushing. Oh my gosh, I forgot to see the doctor. I forgot to do this. I forgot to do that, right? You hear these horror stories of these people that are rushing to work and they forget their children in the car and the children end up passing away in the vehicle, right?
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
hear these stories. Oh my gosh, that's so tragic. And what do we say? We say, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe
Mhm.
they forgot their child. How could a person forget their child in the car, forget to bring the child to the daycare? Well, the
Mhm.
reason why is obviously it's a symptom of a greater cause. And that greater cause is that we live in a world where people are being inundated with information, they're being swamped with technology. And the lie is that, oh, the more technology you have, the easier it's going to make your life.
Mhm.
And then when you're sitting there late at night thinking, oh, I got to update this iPhone. Oh, this Android update's not taking. Why isn't this thing going? How come I can't check my email? Oh my gosh, I got another bug on my computer. I got to buy. When you go through all these things, you realize it's a lie.
Mhm.
And the lie of technology is that you're going to have all these things and life is going to be better. And so, unless if you're planning to be productive with your life, unless you make a dramatic shift, a dramatic
Mhm.
pivot, you're going to waste time with TikTok videos. You're going to waste time checking messages. You're going to get tons of emails that are flooding you, right? You're going to get someone that wants you to watch a cat video, won't leave you alone. Oh, check it out. Check it out. You got to watch it. Did you watch it? Did you watch it? Right? All
Mhm.
these things are going to flood you. And you're going to find at the end of the day, you've done very little.
Mhm.
And so the reason why I built Clarity Park was one, out of self necessity, I wanted it. But two, the people that I work with and the other individuals, I wanted to make sure that we were connected in a
Mhm.
way that we would share information to stay productive in the least manner possible. I hate lengthy emails. I'm very to the point. Okay. And I do not like unnecessary data.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so that is the purpose of Clarity Park. And if you look at some of the things that we've done in terms of building, I'll tell you, we have some features coming out in the future that I'm very proud to present.
Mhm.
And
Mhm. Mhm.
one of the things was we had a request from students, and they said, we want a free version, and we want to do something. I said, okay, well, you know what, I'm gonna look at it. And the reason why I was hesitant, because I said people need to understand something, that unless you invest in a proper tool, you're not going to appreciate that tool. Right.
Mhm.
And, for me, it was very hard. But at the same token, I did not want to restrict access to the tool. So we
Mhm.
have some upcoming features that we're going to produce. And one of the things we're going to do is we're going to start to introduce people to Clarity Park in a way that they've never been introduced before. We
Mhm.
have a
Mhm.
lot of, medical aspects that are going to be added to this application. And some of these things I can't really discuss because they're patent pending.
Yeah.
But these things are meant to make you more productive in your life.
Mhm.
And when it comes to it, if you start to think about assets, what's more valuable than your time? You want a new
Exactly.
purse? You want a new car? Or do you want a new video to watch? You want a new series? I mean, at some point, you have to start to think about your life in a way and say, you know what? My life is important. A lot of people get caught up in some Netflix series, and God bless Netflix. Okay, I'm sure they got great series, right? They got great content out there, right? There's actually a content war going on now between Apple, between Netflix. But with the whole
Mhm.
coronavirus, Hollywood's been shut down,
Mhm.
and they've stopped filming a lot of series. And yet, for all of that, the amount of stuff that you have, the amount of videos that you have out there, they still can't compete with YouTube
Mhm.
because the YouTube engine keeps rolling. And if you actually study out the numbers, it's impossible for anyone to watch all those YouTube videos in any lifetime.
No.
And so
Yeah.
as a consumer, you got to think, how is this affecting you? How much time are you really spending giving yourself to this stuff? And it's sad but true. A lot of people are caught up in watching television because they don't find their lives interesting, which is sad.
Mm-hmm. It's just sad, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And part of it is, in order for me to introduce productivity, I have to get individuals to believe and to convince them, listen, you are the most interesting, most powerful thing that can happen to this earth because there's only one of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so once you begin to grasp that concept and you begin to understand my time is important, it begins to change every aspect of your life. And listen, this changes your relationships
Mm-hmm.
because you have a lot of individuals, and it's true not just of women, it's also true of men, that they get caught up in someone. And you know how
Mm-hmm.
the story goes. Oh, I met this person. They're so wonderful. They're so, oh, they make me feel so. And, they give themselves to this relationship. And then 3 months, 6 months later, what happened? Oh, that man, he's a fraud, right? And it's like, okay, well, he may be a fraud, but you just wasted 6 months of your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Devoted, right? Investing in an individual that you found. And so when it comes to it, management of your personal time is so critical to what you're able to achieve in life. And, when I went
Mm-hmm.
into some of these departments, I'm dealing with developers. And some of these people, they say, oh, we're a senior developer. And I'm a developer by trade. I'm always coding. This is one of the things I do. I will
Mm-hmm.
never. I've been asked sometimes, people have said, listen, you're such a great manager. Can't you just focus on management? And I said, nope, would never do it. I said, I would never stop coding, never stop developing. Because
Mm-hmm.
when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to it, I own that code. When it comes to Clarity Park, listen, I work with other developers, but I'm the main lead. I'm the main developer. If anyone
Mm-hmm.
leads the project, except for maybe some of the AI guys and some of the big data guys, but for the majority of parts, I make sure, like I said, as a lead developer, that I'm fully involved. And I see a lot of times people start projects where they're not developers, but they're starting
Mm-hmm.
development projects. And what happens is they get some site, someone builds them a site, someone builds them an app, it starts going, but then they can't get developers and the whole thing falls apart. They offer some free service. And this is a constant conundrum. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I talk to people all the time. They say, oh, I had this free service I was using. It was so great. And then the website shut down. Right. And so, one of the things that I do personally is, we have guarantees that'll never happen. We have
Mm-hmm.
guarantees that this project will be like written for years, like 5-year guarantee that if you're using this thing, that it will never come to a point where it will stop. And
Mm-hmm.
so, because I try to build on that foundation, I'm not going to start a project that I can't complete or can't maintain. And
Mm-hmm.
that makes a huge difference. And I think that, when it comes to individuals and their planning, if individuals are more oriented in terms of planning and sitting
Mm-hmm.
down and strategizing, they begin to think about the decisions that they make in their life and how this is going to play out for the next 6 years, because you met some disco queen or some dance hall king, all right, and you want to get involved, or you got to think about how this is going to play out for the next couple of
Mm-hmm.
months, next couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a
Mm-hmm.
huge difference. So we live in a generation that's not strategic, right? With all the information that they have, they're not people that strategize. They don't sit
Mm-hmm.
down, they don't plan. And this is what Clarity Park is meant to do. And when it comes to it, I understand this app is not for everyone. There
Mm-hmm.
are
Mm-hmm.
people that I do not try to sell the app to. I don't want them using it. A lot of times when it comes to it, people like to sell the snake oil version of productivity. Oh, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to buy my book and it's going to make you more productive and it's going to do this and it's going to do wonders in your life. I say, no, an app cannot make you productive. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But, no tool can make you productive.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked for organizations where so we're going to bring in this tool. And once we bring this in, it's going to make us more productive. And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, okay, you got lazy people that don't
Mm-hmm.
work. But now, because you bring in this new tool, all of a sudden they're going to be inspired to start working. No, right?
Mm-hmm.
And fundamentally, productivity starts with a mindset. It
Exactly.
starts with the understanding that, okay, my time is valuable. I've got to start planning before I run off and start just reacting to things in the middle of the day. I got to wake up early. I got to sit down. I have to plan my day, what it is I want to do, what it is I want to achieve. And once I do that, and that's where the app makes it possible. But again, we
Mm-hmm.
understood that. And that's why one of the things that we planned to do was productivity camps throughout the US.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to have different places. We say, okay, let's have different productivity camps to introduce the app to individuals, teach them to use it. But, unfortunately, with the coronavirus, it's changed the way that we were able to do that. But
Mhm.
again, right, fundamentally, we understand that needs to be done. And the way that we connect to individuals that are using the app needs to be one on a personal level. There is a coaching aspect involved
Mhm.
in terms of helping someone to be more productive. We can't just give them an app and disappear and say, good luck. We always
Mhm.
have to be there. We always have to encourage them. And the beauty of Clarity Park is that through artificial intelligence, as an individual's interacting with the app can respond, can send them reports, and
Okay.
let them
Mhm.
know whether they're productive, whether they're not. And all these
Mhm.
things are being processed to help them.
But I think sometimes there's a lot of confusion for people because they think that productivity is about being busy all the time, and that's when we lose complete control of our time. Because we start to do all kind of things and we say, okay, we are productive, we are busy, but I think there's also a lot of education to be made as well, and the culture as well, because especially in North America,
Oh,
it's just crazy. I mean, yes, people are doing so many things, and yet they don't actually have time for what's essential for them. Because you mentioned that we need to have this meeting with ourselves every single day, but then in some culture, just sitting down is just not well accepted. It's like, okay, you're lazy because you're sitting, you're
you're right.
spending this time, alone, and you should be doing something else. So how do I mean? There's what's the balance here?
You're exactly right. And so
Hmm.
what's happened is when I was younger, I grew up
Hmm.
and I hung around guys that were hackers. Okay.
Hmm.
And it was funny because I knew hackers and I also knew, the gangsters or the bad men. Okay.
Hmm.
And it was very interesting because they were one and the same. Okay.
Hmm.
So some of these guys that I knew, they weren't the Yahoo boys. Okay.
Hmm.
They
Yeah,
were.
yeah,
This
boys.
was exactly. This was the BBS system. This was internet
Hmm.
was brand new. You had to plug in a phone. You got the dial-up line. Things were small. Okay, but what it was they looked at these emerging systems and they saw flaws that they could take
Hmm.
advantage of. And so, if you study out hacking in North America, especially, it starts with the telephone system.
Hmm.
And some of the first hackers were female telephone operators that
Hmm.
they were at their job, they were working these telephone lines, and they understood, hey, I can do this, I can listen to calls, I can patch this in. And eventually people took that. And when it came to payphones in North America, at some point people understood, payphones work on a sound system. If I can just
Hmm.
generate a sound using fake coins or doing this, or just mimic this sound into the phone, I can get free international calling.
Hmm.
And so when
Hmm.
it comes to it, that mindset says, in order for me to advance myself, it's not a matter of physical labor. It's a matter of understanding the system
Hmm.
and working the system. And
Hmm.
you look at that and say, well, that's wrong. Yes, it is wrong. But I think as a moral individual, you need to appropriate the principle of work smart, not hard.
Hmm. Hmm.
If there's anything that any viewer should understand, okay, as of 2020, the world has changed. The world is not the same.
Hmm.
We've entered into a new information age. And in this new information age, it's governed by systems. Okay.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
understand people, listen, that have the hardworking parents, the parents that worked at that factory all their life. They got up in the morning time
Hmm.
and, they told you how they walked to school. And as they get older, the walk gets longer. Okay.
Mhm,
That's what
mhm,
they tell
mhm,
you, right? Oh, they did this, they did that. And you're right. You're exactly right that they see you down, sitting down with a pen and paper, planning your day. Like, what are you doing? Oh, you're wasting your time. You should be doing this. You should be doing that.
mhm,
But
mhm,
no, listen, if you are going to, prosper, get ahead, okay, in today's generation, you're going to have to work smart, not hard. In fact, I
mhm,
was at a company and I remember there was a guy and this guy was putting in 10 hours a day and they fired him. And I was a
mhm,
young employee at the time. I said, whoa, my gosh, well, he's such a hard worker. They said, no, he wasn't a smart worker. They said he should
mhm,
have been able to do his job in a much shorter time, but he was overthinking it and he was trying to compensate with hard work what he failed to think about or to do in the immediate. And I
mhm,
think that was a critical lesson that I learned because I said to myself, I don't want to waste time. I don't want to waste weeks. I don't want to waste. I said, I need to be very decision oriented and I need
mhm,
to be very critical in my methodology. And when it comes to it, I need to understand that we live in a world that's governed by systems, and these
Mm-hmm.
systems are changing. And unless you understand the change, I'll give you a perfect example: money. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
finances have changed dramatically. There, I say this: there's too much money in the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there are finances in this generation that have never existed. Okay, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
come through markets, whether it's come through private families, or whether it's come through the transfer of wealth. And I remember I was talking to a large VC. This man was an investment banker, and we were having a discussion. I get a lot of calls about Clarity Park, and so I
Mm-hmm.
said to this man, well, because there's so much money, I said, your money doesn't really mean anything to me. And he was so offended by that statement. But the reality is if there's a lot of money, then there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people willing to give money. Then if you're going to receive any type of grants, or you have to look for more than that. If you have,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a fact of marriage. If a woman has 25 men that want to marry her, or a man has 25 women he can choose from, then he has to look beyond the surface. He has to look to,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, I need something more. And if that's true in those aspects, it's also true regarding finances.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this man was a bit offended because I was looking at an international project. I said, okay, what can we do to go international? What can you do? Well, I can give you money. I said, okay, and and he got very offended. But that is
I
the
can
reality.
imagine.
Exactly. And that is the reality in which we live. And when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to it, most people don't understand that, we talked about, the US, they had their elections last night, all these things are taking place. But there is, in a large sense, a plutocracy where
Mm-hmm.
you have billionaire versus billionaire,
Mm-hmm.
and you have people that are willing to invest in all sorts of places. And if they find a person that has a plan, they find a person that's well, put together, that goes a long way. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so this changes the scope, because a lot of people like to say, oh, I don't have money. Okay, well, you know what? That's not an excuse anymore,
Mm-hmm.
because there are so many
Mm-hmm.
opportunities, so many avenues for that. But that being
Mm-hmm.
said, you have to change the way that you think about life, because now it's a matter of strategy. Do you have a
Mm-hmm.
plan together? Do you have something that you put in place? Have you been working on this plan? What have you achieved based upon your time that you've had?
Mm-hmm.
All these things make a difference.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's have a break and we'll come back and continue this amazing conversation. I think there are some concepts, and I know that my audience must be disrupted today, but that's for the good cause. So don't go anywhere. We're coming back, and after this short break.
I don't want my technology to enslave me.
I want to take control of my future.
I need to be more organized.
I don't want my devices to control me. Clarity of heart, clarity of mind, Clarity Park.
So we are back. We are back with David, and I think he's disrupting our thinking today, and
Hopefully.
that's good news for us, because we need to understand how things are changing, and how we can move forward, because we don't want to get stuck where we are. We want to be able to contribute, and to create a positive impact as well wherever we are, because that's part of the greatness that we're really talking about. So you have this book where called Selling the Cow, and you talking about the 5 pillar of disruption. What are those pillars?
Okay, so let me just take you through it in terms of context. So when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to it, again, selling the cow, it starts off with Jack and the Beanstalk. Most people are
Mm-hmm.
familiar with Jack and the Beanstalk. You have a young
Mm-hmm.
man, he's got his mother, they're going through a hard time. The mother tells him, go sell the cow, take it to the market and get some money that we might, buy something before we die. And so on
Mm-hmm.
his way to the market, he meets a man, some strange venture capitalist, and he, sells the cow to this man for these magic beans. And so when he sells the cow, he gets the magic beans, he climbs the beanstalk, finds a giant, he ends up doing all this stuff. So he said, that's an interesting story for kids.
Mm-hmm.
So, we took it and, I looked at it. And, when I first came up with this concept, it was something I had in the back of my mind that it always just, was there like a thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to think about the different factors of this and how it played out, because I was thinking about some of the pillars of disruption, and this fable, this little parable, it fit right in. And the more I began to analyze, I said, okay, let me go through this in detail. So when it comes to the 5 pillars, I'll just go through them briefly, right?
Mm-hmm.
One, okay, in the book, it talks about leadership. So Jack, okay, he's on his way to the market.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he has a cow, right? The mother says, go sell it. We're
Mm-hmm.
going to get some money. We're going to eat, and then we'll die. Okay. And he disobeys his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing is, when it comes to bad leadership, okay, this is one thing that is
Mm-hmm.
critical to understand, because we live in a generation of bad leadership. Jack Welch,
Mm-hmm.
when he was a CEO of General Electric, he made that company one of the most profitable companies in America. When he left, you look at his successors, and General Electric was started by Thomas Edison. Now, this was a
Mm-hmm.
company that had millions of dollars, had great value, and the successors, they drove it to the ground. And
Whoa.
more you see this happening. And so what
Mm-hmm.
happens is Jack's being told something by his mother. He said, go sell the cow, take the money, and we're going to eat, then we'll die. And
Mm-hmm.
Jack says, that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
Jack says, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something else, but I can't do that. Like, this cow would have been a source of residual income. And so I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
rid of this. And a lot of times you find individuals that they get caught up in bad leadership.
Mm-hmm.
You get caught up in believing philosophies. We talked, just recently, we made that comment, okay, that, money and the construct of money has totally changed in 2020. Okay, there are
Mm-hmm.
people, listen, you put a plan together, you start talking to people in China, you start talking to people in the Middle East, and, if they like your plan, they'll get back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so it's totally changed. You can connect with people on a global level. There are things that you can do. How you
Mm-hmm.
structure yourself, how you structure your presentation is what's very critical. But
Mm-hmm.
again, when it comes to leadership, in order for this man, Jack, to be a disruptor, he had to start by not listening to leadership. Some of
Mm-hmm.
those things about working very hard, yes, but you need to work smart, not hard. And so
Mm-hmm.
again, there are individuals that will mislead you. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you have individuals that are successful. Okay, and I think I mentioned this, but again, in the 90s, I met with a man. I wanted to do a website for online reviews. And again, you're talking
Mm-hmm.
the mid 90s. And I met with this man, and he was a very wealthy man. And this man
Mm-hmm.
convinced me that online reviews would never be a thing on the internet because the manufacturer
Mm-hmm.
would never allow it. And I listened to that man at the time, and he was so wrong. And you look at
Mm-hmm.
today, some of the online review coming. I mean, it dominates the web, online
Yeah.
review. And so I realized, you know what? Number one, do not listen to bad leadership. And this is why I
Mm-hmm.
wrote it, because
Mm-hmm.
there are individuals that will not speak like I speak or say what I say because they don't do what I do. They're not
Mm-hmm.
developers. They're not putting products out there. They're not public facing. They're not doing these things.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they've
Mm-hmm.
come into money. Sometimes they've come into inherited wealth. But again, right, these people lead a lot of people astray. So number one
Mm-hmm.
is leadership. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you need to break ranks with leadership if you're going to be disruptive, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it makes the greatest thing. There are people that will follow bad leadership
Mm-hmm.
to the grave. Number two, life outside the box. Okay, we talk about unorthodox methods. So in the parable, what happens? Jack is approached by this man. He has some magic beans. And he said, listen, take these magic beans. You can do this, do this. Okay, Jack's never had this before, never
Mm-hmm.
heard this before. But he tries something he's never tried before because he's willing to think outside of the box.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to it, if you think about retail in North America, the reason why retail died is because they wouldn't think outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
I understand Sears. Sears had a financial model where they started working towards credit. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
they started moving with this. We make more money off of credit than we do off of retail. But again, they would not think outside the box. We had a video company in North America, Blockbuster Video. And
Mm-hmm.
Blockbuster Video was selling VCR tapes, okay, renting them out to customers, making their money. Then when the big disc came out and the DVDs, all these things, but they would not go online. And they were
Mm-hmm.
approached by this small company called Netflix at the time. And when they were approached by Netflix, they ignored it. And again, right, if you want to be a disruptor, you're going to have to think outside the box. I took a trip recently. I was down in Jamaica. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people in Jamaica, they're on the corner, they're selling, their food, they're selling their items. And I talked to someone. I said, hey, so what are you doing? So, I just go out here, I sell some food, make some money. And I talked to this person. I said, have you ever considered like the stock market, have you ever considered day trading? Just to get their perspective, right? Very smart
Mm-hmm.
as well. And he said, this is what our family does.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And by that response, it was a mindset. Not to say I tried it or I contemplate or I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I'm skilled or versed. He said, no, this is what our family does. And
Whoa.
that type of thinking many times is what hinders people from ever becoming a disruptor or from ever
Mm-hmm.
progressing beyond where they are. I mean, the third thing we can talk about, which goes down to the risk. And in chapter 3, when it talks about risk, it goes into the fact that, Jack makes this decision. He says, okay, you know what? I'm going to buy these magic beans. I'm going to take a risk.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'll tell you, a lot of people, okay, and I found this out when I started doing stuff. One of the things I learned is I don't tell my friends or family what I'm doing. I let them find out after.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes,
Good. They're
exactly,
gonna discourage you. I
exactly.
know this feeling.
They discourage you. And the reason why they do is because, they don't like risk. Okay.
Risk
People
averse,
by
yeah.
nature are risk adverse. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people are quick to criticize because you know what? It's easier to criticize someone than it is to try to help them out or to try to
Mm-hmm.
support them in terms of what they're doing. And so when it comes to it, Jack was willing to take a risk. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
so we live in a generation where some of the new technology companies, okay, they've grown so much that they actually have
Mm-hmm.
political interference now. You look at Facebook, election time comes around, people want to know what's Facebook doing, what are they going to do about this? But again, right, the movers and shakers in terms of technology and companies in general are risk takers.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why you see gentlemen that have, multi-million-dollar companies, yet they're not satisfied. And why
Mm-hmm.
aren't they satisfied? Because they know and they understand that their business can be disrupted by 17-year-olds sitting at a desk in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why they're always investing. They're always looking to take risks. They're always looking to find emerging markets that they can begin to expand into. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's critical that people step outside of the box and begin to take risk. And if you're not a risk taker, and again, we're not talking about gambling, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because a gambler, and this is part of what's defined within that chapter 3, a gambler will gamble until all the
Mm-hmm.
money's gone. That's what makes a gambler a gambler. But taking a risk is someone that sits down and is able to assess and make proper valuations. And so
Mm-hmm.
here you have Jack. He says, you know what? If I go home with this money, we're going to eat and die.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm going to die anyway, might as well buy these magic beans. Might as well take a chance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stranger, again, right? A stranger is telling him something that he's never seen. It's never occurred. And he says, you know what? I'm going to take a chance. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When you begin to study out internet search technology and you look at Google, okay, at
Mm-hmm.
one time Google wanted to sell themselves to a larger competitor. And they went to that competitor and they said, you can buy Google. And I believe the price, I can't remember what the price was for, $1 to $10 million, something like that. Very, very, very low price. And this competitor said no. And if they had bought them, if they had just simply taken that risk, it would have never even made a dent in their books.
Mm-hmm.
And they could have owned Google outright. The algorithm, the company could have owned everything outright. And so this pattern through life is so, so prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk to individuals as they're older in life and they're upset, the main thing that upsets them is not that they didn't buy this item or that item, is that they failed to take a risk.
Mm-hmm.
It's that they failed to say, you know what, let me go for it. Let me see what happens. Let me just take that chance.
Mm-hmm.
So I would encourage anyone, especially any viewer, that if you want to understand disruption, you have to understand that there are risks involved.
Mm-hmm.
And failure, okay, is not a bad thing. Okay, to do something that doesn't work out is perhaps one of the greatest life lessons that you can learn.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it teaches you about risk. So the fourth thing that we have is, there's a chapter called Who Climbed the Beanstalk.
Mm-hmm.
And that number 4, Who Climbed the Beanstalk, is it's a very powerful chapter. I'd say perhaps one of the most prominent, because in terms of disruption, it talks about the who factor, which is the HR.
Mm-hmm.
And so not everyone is going to want to be that person.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone's going to want to be that person that does something no one else in their community is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone's going to want to be that person that's willing to say, okay, you know what? Let me take a chance and let me do this.
Mm-hmm.
But this is so critical. And so, within a lot of companies, one of the things you find is that the HR department, okay,
Mm-hmm.
is very, very guarded. Okay. It's almost politicized to a degree. And so, when you're in the world of work,
Paralyzing.
exactly, right? Sometimes what you deal with is, and it talks in the chapter, nepotism. Okay. I remember one
Mm-hmm.
time there was a company in Toronto, it was a startup at the time, great startup. And you know what? I had a great relationship with these guys when I met them, loved them. They wanted me to work for them. We're working out the details and said, we can't hire you. I'm like, what? I said, yeah, we can't hire you because, the owner's son is coming and the owner wants to hire his son. And I thought to myself, wow, wow. Right. And they just very straightforward. Hey, the owner has got a son and the son needs a job. He's getting out of school. So he's going to hire him for, and here I am, seasoned guy. I've got years of experience
Mm-hmm.
and I'm hearing this. And they said, but you know what? There might be another position in the future. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, no, because I don't want to work in that environment that's filled with
Yeah.
nepotism. Right. I don't want to work in an environment where people are choosing people that are their friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to it, if you're going to do anything, you have to choose the best person for the job.
Mm-hmm.
And you may be called names for that. You may be, oh, well, you only take these people that have degrees from this university with this skill. And say, yeah, because I need people with this
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
skill. And this particular university is providing this skill. And so if you start building upon that foundation, and that who factor is so
Mm-hmm.
critical to disruption. You look at Apple, what happened with Steve Jobs? Apple at some point decided, I think it was in 85, they decided he's not the man for the job.
Mm-hmm.
They built the company, had seen the company through all these things. They decided we got a guy, John Scully. This man,
Mm-hmm.
John Scully, he's from Pepsi, I believe. He can do a better job. And they thought they could replace a person. And there are businesses, okay, and some of these businesses, well, they have a mentality people don't matter. Okay? This is
Mm-hmm.
what you find. I'll say no, people matter. Okay, you go into a business. I remember being in some companies where salesmen and saleswomen would be paid huge amounts of money. And what happens? People in the company complain, "Oh, look at that sales guy. They
Mm-hmm.
pay him all that money. He doesn't do anything." No, listen, he's that personality that goes golfing that convinces that other company to
Mm-hmm.
give the company money. And so having the right people, having the right individuals makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you have an idea, you have a product, doesn't mean you can bring it to pass. There are very few individuals that can bring to pass products and introduce products in a proper manner. And this
Mm-hmm.
is something that, you know, a disruptor understands.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the space race, you had Elon Musk and you had Jeff Bezos, and and these people are all competing. And when it comes to it, at the time, Jeff Bezos, from a financial perspective, way ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to Elon Musk, and I don't know, maybe it's the South African blood, but he's very let's just say creative in his methods, and so
Mm-hmm.
he was able to move into that space. And who makes a huge difference when it comes to disruption? And this is
Mm-hmm.
something, again, right? When it comes to climbing the beanstalk, Jack decides, I'm not going to hire someone to do this. I'm going to do it myself. So sometimes you are the best person for the job. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes a lot of people think, if I can just get money, if I can just hire someone. No, sometimes it has to be you, because you sometimes are the best person to lead the project forward. So the
Mm-hmm.
fifth thing is perhaps the golden hen. Okay. And this is what we find, at the end of the parable, right? Jack
Mm-hmm.
goes, he
Mm-hmm.
climbs the beanstalk, he sees all this wealth. And what happens is it's interesting, because with all the wealth that he sees, he makes a decision. And what does he say? He says, I want the hen, because the
Mm-hmm.
hen can reproduce and can create that golden egg. And if I can
Mm-hmm.
just get, and so he ignores all the gold, all the diamonds, the jewelry, whatever, all the vegetables of the giant, and says, I got to get that golden hen. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so product development is critical. Sometimes you have people that have a phenomenal product and they don't realize it,
Mm-hmm.
because all they can see, or all they can see is, they're looking at the outward elements. They're looking
Mm-hmm.
at the fact that, what, I'm not making money, but I have this product and people are using it. Okay. Well, if people are using your product, you're way ahead of the game. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you have something that people want, something that people need, then that's a great thing. And so when it comes to product evaluation, sometimes the only difference between a disruptor and a non-disruptor is that a disruptor can properly evaluate what product is required. I
Mm-hmm.
have things that we've done, okay, things that are coming out, in the near future where, I've worked with individuals. And as I'm working with individuals, some of these individuals are engineers and I'm describing the project to them.
Mm-hmm.
And again, some of these engineers, they haven't worked within the technology field as long as I have. And also, too, they haven't traveled. And, I think St.
That's
Augustine
a
had
key one.
exactly. St. Augustine had a very powerful statement. He said, the life is, like a book, and those who have not traveled have only read one page.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to it, sometimes people, especially outside of North America, can see and understand products and how they'll have valuation. So, I remember meeting with an individual. I'm talking to him. He's great in this field, great at what he does. But as I'm describing this physical hardware project, he can't see the need. He said, well, but why? But why? And, I try to explain it to him. But again, I'm not dissuaded because I've been there before. And so, a couple months later, I'm talking to people in Asia. They're dying for this project. They
Mm-hmm.
want this thing. And so this individual, at the time I was in Minnesota, that's a whole nother conversation because I was there a year before the whole George Floyd thing took place. So I'm down in Minnesota talking to this individual, trying to explain to him something, but in his scope of life, he cannot see or understand that product and
Mm-hmm.
how it would be valuable. And so it makes a huge difference being able to have or to evaluate the product that you have.
Mm-hmm.
That is huge
Mm-hmm.
because you have a lot of people. And, I remember one story. I remember one guy I knew, and he had a friend that was down in Rwanda at the time. And this man wanted to come to North America. And the man had a business in Rwanda. He was making money. So I'm going to come to North America. I'm going to bring my wife. We're going to do this, going to do that, do this, do that. And, my friend talked to him and said, hey, listen, don't do it. And this man was shocked. I said, what? He said, yeah, don't do it. He said, listen, you come here. You're going to work. Your wife's going to work. You're going to be taxed. You're going to do this. He said, listen, you're going to end up spending all this time. He said, there are people here in North America. They're trying to send money back to Rwanda just so they can have what you have.
Mm-hmm.
You want to leave all that and come here? And so sometimes you have to properly evaluate what it is that you're building, what it is that you have.
Mm-hmm. 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 And that's the that's the sad thing. We always think that the it's greener on the other side, and we
Oh
don't
yes. Oh
take
yeah.
time to analyze. And this meeting with ourselves is very important every single day. Understand what we are grateful for and how we how what we have. Understand what we have and how valuable it is, because sometimes we just follow the flow and want to do like somebody next door or a friend or a brother, without understanding exactly what's the value basically of taking such a decision. And it can be very detrimental in the long term actually, and a killer in a way. So I hope the audience got all those 5 steps. And like you can see, there's a process. Disruption can be understood, and there's a process to go through it. So don't be afraid, because I think people are afraid of disruption because they don't understand exactly. Everything starts with fear, and with the fear they get paralyzed, and they basically get left behind. So let's have our last break and then come back and conclude the show. It's a very interesting conversation that I really don't want to stop, but it's we might have to bring David another for the second show to get to get to have his knowledge in the subject a little bit more. So don't go anywhere. We're gonna be back soon. So we are back. We are back for with David. And before David, leave this platform, David, I wanted to ask you, what is your message for for the audience as far as the digital world is concerned? How do you see things evolving, and what are the key things that we need to know and understand and implement to be able to fit into this new this new stage of disruption that we are going through.
I think that for the audience, people need to understand that the most valuable thing we have right now is your time, your productivity, and thirdly, your creativity.
Hmm.
With all that we have in terms of artificial intelligence, it's impossible for us to generate creativity.
Hmm.
And I think that a lot of times people have an old world mentality where they limit themselves. And people need to
Hmm.
realize, especially in this generation, so many of the guards, so many of the barriers of entrance have been dropped.
Hmm.
And from any point in the world, any individual that's creative, that utilizes their time properly, and that becomes productive can begin to disrupt entire industries.
Hmm.
And that is so critical because, this did not occur 20 years ago. This was not, it may not be something that is possible 20 years from now.
Hmm.
So I think that people need to understand we are in a very, very special time period, and that there are so many factors, socioeconomic factors, political factors on a global level that are changing, and that we as individuals have a chance to enter into that stratosphere to
Hmm.
create, and to disrupt industries.
Hmm. 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 Thank you so much, David, for
Thank you.
all this information and those insights. Is really very, very good. And I hope, the audience got, the best of it. And I actually encourage you to not just stop at this stage, to start to implement everything that, David talked about today, and also share with your teams, share in your community, share wherever you can, so that people understand that like he said, we are in a system. Those systems change, there's disruption all the time. So if we get the right steps, we should be very confident to fit into everything and not be afraid of the disruption. So how do people stay in contact with you or get in contact with you if they want to continue this conversation, which is such such an important one, especially with what's happening right now?
Well, I encourage individuals to go to the blog.claritypark.com. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
articles that we have there regarding productivity, helping people be productive. I'm always
Mm-hmm.
there. And so there's commentary on the blog. People can reach out to us on Instagram. Our Instagram for Clarity Park is it's gaining a lot of weight. Social
Mm-hmm.
media for us is something we're just starting to focus on. We're focusing on the structure of the company, other things like that. But now, we've got a lot of people there. So I encourage people to reach out there. And, encourage people to pick up a copy of the book, sellingthecow.com. If you go to the website there, you can pick
Mm-hmm.
it up through Amazon or some of the other retailers. But,
Mm-hmm.
I encourage them definitely reach out to me through Clarity Park and all those forms of social media that are so wonderful that we have in this generation.
Mm-hmm. 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 Fantastic. So please, make sure you go to the website. So there's clarity park.com, and then there's also for the book. Make sure you get a copy of the book so that you can have more detail on the 5 pillars that David mentioned today. So sellingthecar.com, and please get in contact if you need more information, or yeah, and then just get to try this new organizer. I know that a lot of us are very disrupted in our life, and there are things that we're not able to do because we're not managing our time really well. So please have a look and check with David to see how, this new platform can help you to get organized and enjoy, yourself, your time with your family and with anybody that is important, in your life. So that's all for today. Thanks again, David, for your time,
Well,
your
thank you for having
inspiration, and this great knowledge that you've shared with us. Definitely was disrupted today, so that's good. That's good news for me because I like the disruption. I like the risk. So it means that I'm growing and I'm going to the next step of my greatness, which is what this show is all about. Really making sure that people understand that there's no limit. We're learning every day, and like you said, we have to continue to think out of the box and take those risks that are important for us to expand and to become disruptor ourselves. So that's all for today. I will be back on Friday for another episode of the Greatness Engineering Hour show. But for now, it's bye bye, everybody. And thanks again, David, for being with us today.
well,
Thank you
thank you.
so much.